Welcome to Wear Your Cape to Work, a podcast hosted by Project Insight. We believe that project and program managers are the real superheroes of every organization. We want you to hear their stories so you can be inspired to wear your own cape to work. Today on Wear Your Cape to Work, we talk with David Doty, an education leader who's taken on some of the toughest assignments in the field. David shares what it's like to launch a brand new school district in a deeply divided Utah community, and how he later revitalized educational programs for incarcerated adults across the country. We get into what it takes to lead projects under scrutiny, build trust in fractured environments, and stay grounded in purpose when the project pressure is on. This is an episode about the real work of systems change and the kind of steady leadership that gets it done. Thank you so much for joining us today, David. We're so glad to have you here on Wear Your Cape to Work.
I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you, Trina and Matthew, for having me.
It's really our pleasure. We know that project and program managers all across the nation are leading projects in different industries and different sectors. And today we're excited to have you because we haven't had someone from the educational sector yet on the podcast. So you'll be our first representative of someone who's leading projects in that space, which is really different, say from someone in healthcare, or you're leading, manufacturing projects. We've spoken to people from those groups, even roller coasters at Universal Studios. Although that might feel like you're managing a roller coaster sometimes, I think, in your background. But maybe you can share with our audience a little bit about maybe how you got into education. It doesn't have to be a whole big story, but how your career path has zigged and zagged between seemingly two passions, right? Law and education. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, thanks. So my career is really, it's all been in education for the past 30 plus years, but I've had the opportunity to work in a lot of different roles. So I started actually as a classroom teacher, as a high school Spanish teacher in California. And both my mom was a public school teacher when I was young, and my dad was a university professor. So it was kind of, in my nature, I guess, to go into education. But I ultimately from there went back to law school and spent the next approximately dozen years as a school attorney. I represented public schools and colleges here in Utah. And then from there, I transitioned into educational administration or educational leadership. And over the past 20 years, I've been able to work in a lot of different roles in leadership, in higher education, in public education as a school superintendent, in the private sector, doing some consulting and working with some federal programs, correctional facilities, and now I'm currently back in higher education, working for an online university called Western Governors University here in Salt Lake City.
Sometimes when you think of education projects, you're thinking, I just go into a classroom and there's teachers to manage and teacher work, right? It's just curriculum, or it's the school play, or it's maybe admissions and things like that. But I would really like it. We could kick off with one of your biggest achievements, I think, at least from what I'm seeing, is your role as superintendent of the Canyon School District. And the reason I think it's such a proud achievement is because you opened and started a new school district after 100 years of not having a new school district in this Utah space. And you came into it kind of through a public referendum, it sounds like. And then we're overseeing, 34,000 students and 45 schools, $200 million for that opening operating budget. I mean, that's amazing that you jumped into that big, huge pond. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. As you mentioned, it was really a very unique situation. Utah geographically is a very big state, but the population is mostly concentrated in northern Utah and between Provo and Logan. So you have Salt Lake City in the middle of that. So it's kind of an urban area, and then the middle, the southern part of the state's very rural. So most of the school districts are county contiguous. They're county school districts. But here in Salt Lake County, there's multiple districts because of the population. It's just so much larger. And so anyway, that Jordan School District at the time was, I want to say, around 80 to 90,000 students, and just growing exponentially every year. They had, I think, almost 100 school facilities. It was, I think, one of the 20 largest school districts in the country at the time, top 20, 25, something like that, just in terms of number of students. And so ultimately, in the fall of 2007, the mayors of 5 municipalities on the east side, the eastern, basically half of the school district, got together and, pursuant to some state legislation, put a referendum on the ballot to create a new district. And then by the next summer, basically, the new school board was elected and they opened the job for the superintendent. I was appointed to be the superintendent at the end of August of 2008, and I was literally the first employee. Now, having said that, the way it worked was that we inherited all of the teachers and the staff, right? So, like, I didn't have to go out and hire thousands of teachers and principals. They kind of all came with us. So I was the first district employee, the school district central office employee, right? And I remember the morning after the board appointed me, I woke up and just looked in the mirror and thought, what have I done? I mean, I didn't even have an office. I didn't have anything. I had no staff. I had no employees. I literally sat there at my kitchen table the first couple of days and just started sketching stuff out about what I knew needed to be done immediately. We had a year of transition. So from 2008 to 2009, we basically had that year to sort of put the organization together, get the central office staffed, get everything sort of put in place, and then a year later, in July 2009, is when we began independent operations. But suffice it to say that 12 months went by very, very quickly, because there was so much to be done. As you mentioned, Trina, it was still a fairly large school district. It still was the 5th largest in Utah, even divided up like that. We had 34,000 kids and between 4,000 and 5,000 full-time employees, a $200 to $300 million operating budget, 45 buildings to look after. It was a large enterprise. And so we had to, get everything sort of switched over and put together, everything from the IT systems to the personnel records to benefits to, the bus routes, to all of that logistical stuff that it takes to get, to operate schools. And so we had to sort of get that all done in 12 months and be ready to fly. And it was pretty terrifying, actually.
I feel like our audience is sweating. The audience is like, wow, how do we do this in 12 months?
That's kind of the background of it. And then I actually was, in charge of actually operating the district for 4 years thereafter.
Matt, I can see that you have a thought brewing.
What jumps out to me is, like, where did that legal hat come into play? How much of that, legal background was so beneficial for you in making all this transition occur?
It came into play on day one, really,
Sure.
for a couple of reasons. One is that the actual vote, the referendum that was conducted to approve this new district, was still under legal challenge when I was appointed to the position in federal court, in federal district court, and so because what the people in the remaining part of the district, they didn't get to vote on it, and so they filed this, basically a voting rights challenge, saying, hey, we were affected, we should have been able to vote. And so they'd filed a lawsuit in federal court. And so that was still pending. And then, of course, we had all of these just logistical legal issues, like what happens to teachers' benefits, like what happens to their retirement, right? What happens to teachers who want to move from one district to the other? What happens to their contracts? What happens to, we had to switch title to literally every facility in the whole district, right? What we had to set tax rates according to state law for the new districts. I mean, it was just, 1,001 different legal issues. But not only did the sort of knowledge and experience of having been an education lawyer come into play and provide a lot of provide a lot of support for me.
Sure.
It was really, I think, Matt, even more so having the experience of, knowing how to negotiate, how to resolve conflict, how to, bring people together. I think a lot of times people think lawyers, that's all they do is try to divide and win and conquer. And that's sometimes true, right? When you're in litigation, but, a lot of the work of the counselor at law, if you will, is trying to just prevent problems and solve problems and try to find middle ground. And so I had to do that literally every day for 5 years. And so that was really helpful background to have. Yeah.
Our audience of project and program managers are of the same. They come into projects. Sometimes they haven't been there. It's a new project, new to them, new to a whole organization. They've got to get stakeholders on board. They have to get buy-in from teams. They have to get buy-in from communities. What nugget would you offer to that group as far as, your takeaway on how to, get people behind you and draw support and deal with that resistance?
Yeah, that's a great question, Trina. I think that was really probably the hardest part, but also the most rewarding part of that job, of that big project, which, as you can imagine, was really comprised of dozens and dozens of smaller projects. But as Matt, you mentioned, there are multiple constituencies. I kind of laugh. I remember the night I was appointed to the position, my parents had come to the school board meeting to see the vote of the school board and all that. And they had some public comment, right, from members of the public who wanted to come up and say something. And so after the vote, there was somebody from the teachers union who came up and spoke, and there was somebody from the bus drivers association that came up and spoke, and there was somebody from the PTA who came up and spoke. It was about 5 or 6 different constituencies, and those were only a fraction of all of them. But I remember going out in the lobby after the school board meeting, and my dad just looked at me and he said, "Good luck," right? Because it was just, even though everybody was positive, it was still like everything they said was, "Well, we look forward to working with you on X, on Y, on Z." And he was like, you could just tell already, like some of that stuff's just incompatible, right? And so, that was really difficult. The first challenge I had really was to get the employees settled down. Because like I said, we inherited basically 4,000 employees who were very, very anxious about how this was going to affect their employment, their pay, their benefits. There was no roadmap for any of this. And so the first thing I did was, I went around and I held a staff meeting, a face-to-face staff meeting with the teachers at every one of those 45 schools. It took me, 2 or 3 months to get that done. But I basically just went and let them ask questions, right? Said, here I am, here's my vision, right? Here's what I know, here's what I don't know. Let them ask questions. And I think that really helped a lot. And by the way, I did that every year for 5 years. So I think I had over 100 something odd staff meetings over those 5 years. But I think that really, really helped to kind of just bring people together. We had to do a lot of just public meetings too, right? With parent groups and with the PTA as an organization and other groups, with the mayors and the city council. So it was a lot of communication, and it was a lot of really just trying to bring people together and say, look, we all have to be in this together if it's going to work. Right. I think, Trina, you posted something the other day on LinkedIn about, swimming and staying in your lane, but that really doesn't work in business, right? In the workforce. And that was really my message. I'm like, look, we all have to jump in this pool together here, right? We all have to be swimming, or it's not going to work. I cannot do this by myself. And that's one of the messages I really tried to convey, especially to the teachers and, the people that work day in and day out with our students, is, look, I have confidence in you, right? no matter what happened here, no matter how you feel about it, whether it was good idea, bad idea, whatever, the bottom line is, come a year from now, we have to teach these kids in schools. They're going to show up, and it's going to be our job to teach them. And I have confidence that you will do that. And I have confidence that we'll be able to do a great job of that together. And so, yeah.
So really, I think your takeaway is that when you're navigating all of this, these treacherous waters, right? The idea is to gather the stakeholders and get them aligned on that same vision, so that way everybody can start going the right direction, right? Together. When after that, you were VP of Education, right? And you were in charge of implementing, Jobs Corps centers under the U.S. Department of Labor. So still within, the education space, a little bit different kind of avenue. What was that role like? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, it was different, but similar. And just going back to your statement, Matt, about the importance of vision. I mean, I would say that really is in education, probably in most enterprises, right? For the leaders to be able to develop and articulate and communicate a really clear vision that people and then help people understand their role in making that vision come to life. And so that was something I really tried to do in Canyon School District and thereafter in the jobs I've had. As you mentioned, I was a vice president of education for a private company that provides or operates Job Corps centers and correctional facilities around the country. And so my team supported the teachers and other education staff in those facilities. And so, my vision with that company, with those services, was really pretty similar, if not identical, to what I did in Canyons District, which was every single young person or incarcerated person that we serve deserves the best education we can provide, right? Mm-hmm. Not something mediocre, yes. Not something less than because they're in prison or because they're poor, because they dropped out of high school. We should be giving them the best, right? The best instruction, the mm-hmm. best, confidence, the best support socially and emotionally, all of that. Like, we need to give them our best. And anything less than that is not acceptable, because, education is the key to success in any endeavor mm-hmm. in life, particularly if you come from a disadvantaged background. You're a young person of color, you're a person of, young person coming out of poverty, you're an incarcerated person. That if you don't get that education and develop at least your basic literacy and math and communication skills, I mean, you can't really do anything. And so that really has always been my vision, right? When I was in law school, I was just really taken with the case that I think everybody knows about, Brown versus Board of Education, right? The desegregation case. And, I've had the opportunity to actually see both the good legacy of that and the sort of lack of commitment to that in various aspects of my career. I actually had the opportunity to work as a lawyer for 5 years in South Carolina, and one of the plaintiff school districts in Brown was a South Carolina parents, Black parents from South Carolina. And so, there's still a lot of segregation in that state, not by law, but there's still a lot of inequality between communities of color and white communities. And so it's always just been a passion of mine to try to overcome that inequality in whatever way that I can. And that's ultimately, I think, my personal vision, if that makes sense. And I try to just kind of fold everything into that, that every child, every young person, every adult deserves to have a quality education, a high quality education.
One of the superpowers that project managers we've talked to bring into their work is that willingness to let their personal passions be fulfilled in their work. Even our first episode, we spoke to a project manager, Stephen Hall from Fairlife Milk, and his passion to bring this healthful, high calorie, sustaining, life-giving product to their customers was just part of his day-to-day work. He could go to work and that passion drove him, and it drove their project work, and it drove the way he managed the teams. And I imagine, in all the things that you've done, you've brought that passion along, and your teams probably, it's contagious, right? If the leader of that team has that passion, it's easy to have that, drive you too in the team.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm very passionate about the work that I do in education, particularly with disadvantaged communities. And the work I do now at Western Governors University, I'm not the leader, I'm not the CEO like I was at Canyon School District, but I'm still in a leadership position there, and the university really has a very attractive mission to me that I'm passionate about. It really is focused on working adults, or people that are first generation college students. And so I love providing that opportunity for people. And it's been fulfilling in, I think, almost every role I've had, to see that come to fruition in some way. I'll just give you one example, which is in my previous position with Management and Training Corporation. As I mentioned, I worked with several correctional facilities around the country, and just the year before I left there, I was able to secure a fairly large amount of kind of one-time appropriations from the state of Florida to start some new programs in the correctional facilities we operated in Florida. And we were able to use part of that money to get a coding program going for women at our women's facility. And it was just incredible to see these women, some of whom were still working on getting their high school diploma, learning to code websites. And they learned to do it quickly, and they were just over the moon with having that opportunity. And so, it's just thrilling, really, to be able to see people get those kinds of opportunities and be able to take advantage of them.
That's wonderful. It's so rewarding when your work is making the world better as well, right? So you kind of led into segue with what you're doing now as an academic program manager. What sorts of programs are you managing at the university?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm actually, my title is the lead academic program manager for advanced programs. So the Western Governors University does not have a physical campus. It's all online. But we have 4 schools. There's a school of education, a school of business, a school of health, which is essentially nursing programs, and then a school of technology. So I'm in the school of education, and I am basically in charge of our graduate programs. We have several master's level programs. We have a master's in leadership that prepares people to become principals or school administrators. We have a master's in curriculum and instruction that prepares people, to be teacher coaches or work in school district offices, developing curriculum or helping to train teachers. There's a few others, but that's what I do. So the programs that I'm over are several of them need to be updated. They're several years old. We just launched in the School of Ed all new programs for elementary education teachers, people certifying to become elementary ed teachers, and secondary education teachers. So we just launched a whole bunch of brand new bachelor's degree programs. And so my programs are kind of next on the docket, at least 2 or 3 of them. And so it will be a matter of working with a lot of different stakeholders. We have instructors, we have evaluators, we have course designers, instructional designers, product development teams. It's a kind of a matter of bringing all those people together. defining a scope of project in terms of what each program and each course within that program needs to have in it and what it needs to look like and how students are assessed, and then launching those and tracking the data. I mean, that's one of the things that's great about an online college is you have a very rich trove of data that you can look at literally every day to see how students are progressing. And so that's what we pay a lot of attention to just make sure that students are getting through their programs and moving on to a degree, right? Completing, which is the ultimate goal. So yeah, that's what I'm doing now.
And the projects are all people, right? I mean,
They are.
It's a program, but the result is something that a person is actually utilizing, which is different than some of the project management that we see in other sectors. You know, you're making a healthcare, project in revamping all of the way you take credit card payments or run insurance things, which is part of the patient experience, but it isn't the thing that's delivered to a person. It's interesting.
Right. And it's interesting you say that, Trina, because, I've had this conversation multiple times over the course of my career in different settings, which is around who is the customer in education, right? And I mean, I feel like the ultimate customer is the student, whether you're a first grader or you're getting a master's degree, right? You're the consumer, if you will, of the product that we're putting out there, the education, the curriculum, and all of that. However, I think more and more in our country, and I think with good reason, good justification, particularly in higher education, if not in K-12 education, people are looking as much at employers now as the customer, as the student, right? Because if they don't have people who come to them with the basic skills, the technical skills, the communication skills, the soft skills, all of that to be successful in their industry, then they're in trouble. And so, especially at Western Governors University, I mean, that's really a big focus of the university. It's to partner with employers and then send qualified graduates to those employers in these high demand areas, right? Education, health, tech. And so, you're right. Ultimately, yes, we're creating and producing a product, but ultimately the product is a person, right?
You're delivering a person.
Yeah,
you're
delivering hopefully a competent person. Right, right.
I really like, though, that regardless of, I'm building a widget or I'm building that member of society, right? The project life cycle that you just described is identical. It really is. I'm gathering, I'm getting my research, I'm going through, I'm using data at the end to evaluate what we can do differently. Do you think there's, any unique pieces that are involved in implementing in the educational sector? Any challenges specific that you see often?
Yeah, I think there are. I mean, I think probably the biggest challenge in education that's different maybe from manufacturing or some private sector enterprise in business is really the status quo. In business, I mean, if you're running General Motors, if you're running Toyota, you're running Apple, I mean, you have to keep innovating or you're going to get shut down. You're going to get left behind. Whereas education is, kind of operated for 200 plus years, right? And even today in many places on this, well, the students are going to be here. Like we have the students, they're either going to pay, right, if they're college students, or in your K-12, they're going to move into your area and they're going to come to school. And so like, we're going to have students. So what really is the need to sort of do anything different? And so, educators, and I don't necessarily mean this in a critical way. I think it's just kind of the way it is. They just kind of tend to, go along and keep doing the same things they've always done. And I think that's starting to change though, because there are so many choices now that people have for education, right? Both in K-12, where you have, more state laws and policies that are allowing, for example, people to get vouchers to go spend their money on a private school or a homeschool or something. You have charter schools, in the higher ed space. Not only do you have thousands of regular choices, but now you have big online universities like WGU that are available to people and for more convenience and less cost. And so, I think that's starting to change for the better. But I would say that's one of the biggest challenges is just overcoming that status quo.
It's funny because institutions often have that kind of aversion to risk, right? Kind of like you're talking about, where like, I don't want to deviate often because I know they're going to come here. But what you're saying is, we arguably have also said we've had less risk in this space because the next generation is coming, right? They're kind of right behind. It's really fascinating.
Yeah. The other two I would mention is just that, and I mentioned this at the beginning, I think education's unique, at least public education is unique in the sense that you just have all kinds of competing agendas. It's a public education is governed by elected officials, right? It's governed by state legislators, in some cases people in DC, a locally elected school board, and so you have all of these sort of competing political agendas. You have the parent agendas, which are sometimes conflicting. You have business agendas, which are sometimes conflicting. You have employee interests that can be competing. And so I think I'm sure every business, no matter what it is, has competing stakeholders or different stakeholders that they have to manage and deal with. But I think education's different because I think there are more of them and they're more political and they're more public, I guess I would say, right? And along with that, I think another challenge is, although I don't know that this one's unique to education anymore, but I know when I started in Canyons District, it was very new and very unique, and it was very frustrating to me, quite honestly. And that is that this phenomenon that with social media, everyone is an expert, right? Everyone is an expert, and they will tell you loudly and very pointedly, and not just on social media channels, but on the media comment boards and all of that. They can do all this stuff anonymously. And so that can sow a lot of division. It can sow a lot of conflict unnecessarily. And so I know that every business is dealing with that now. I think education might be a little more exacerbated because you're dealing with people's kids, at least in the K-12 space, right?
Yep. There's always somebody taking notes, watching, being a critic in both directions. Someone could love it and hate it all at the same time.
Right.
Yeah. Further fractionalizing all of those already competing stakeholders, right?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So it's sounding to me like this might be one of your project superpowers, but did you have a second to even think about over this course of your career, what superpower you really bring to each of the roles that you've had?
I don't know if I would call this a superpower, but it's something that I have learned to do. And I think in education, and I would say maybe for most industries, it's really important in today's world as fast as it's moving. And that is the ability to adapt quickly, right? I mean, I know in Canyons District, we tried to lay out some pretty concrete plans pretty quickly for our facilities plan and our academic plan and our budget and all of these different things. And for the most part, we stayed the course on that and we were able to see those through. But we did have to adapt. We had to change. We had to negotiate, right? Based on, I'll just give you a very clear example of that. So again, I was appointed at the end of August 2008. The week after I took the job, the economy crashed, right? It was the recession. All the banks like started going under, and I just thought, oh no, like what have I done? Because I mean, we're all state funded, and so once you start having state budgets take a big hit, that means we take a big hit. So I have this huge project now, and I'm like, I'm not going to have the same level of funding. And so we had to pivot. I mean, I know that's maybe kind of an overused word, but I don't know what other word to use. I mean, we just had to say things have changed. Now what? Right. So I think that's really, really important to be able to do. Especially again with technology moving things as quickly as it is, with politics shifting as quickly as they do,
Mm-hmm.
with budgets and the economy kind of all over the place as it seems to be in the last few years. You just have to, obviously you want to lay out a vision and you want to be strong and you want to see that through and be a leader,
Right.
lead out on it, but you can't be so rigid in it that you just plow ahead, right? Just damn the torpedoes, right? You have
Right.
to be able to adapt appropriately, I would say, right? And in a timely way. I would say that another, I don't know, maybe superpower or talent that I've been able to develop over the years is just, and we've talked about this, but it's just the ability to collaborate. Again, I
Yeah.
know that can be sort of a worn out, cliched word, but I don't know what other word to use. I mean, when you have multiple constituencies, you have to hire great people. You have to support them in doing their jobs. You have to collaborate with the various stakeholders to try to find common ground and get that buy-in, get that support so that you can advance the agenda and the vision that you're passionate about. If you try to go it alone, it just doesn't work. And I think in education, that's just absolutely critical. You can't be a dictator. You have to work with people and all kinds of people across the economic spectrum, across the language spectrum, across the political spectrum, and across the age spectrum. And so it's just, being able to sort of not just communicate with people, but listen empathetically, try to, hear what people really are saying and hear what they're needing. And then, trying to find common ground, I think is really, really important. And it's not easy. You obviously can't please everybody all the time, nor should you try to, right? You have to set that vision. You have to believe in that. You have to do what's right, notwithstanding the critics. But, my approach has always been that I want even the critics, even if they disagree with me, I want them to ultimately, hopefully, respect me as a person and respect the fact that I listened genuinely and tried to take their concerns into consideration.
Well, I think we really come full circle here. I'm picturing your dad greeting you at the end of that, board meeting and saying good luck. And really what you're talking about is what you were facing. Look, I have all these different groups. And I'm feeling like it's a mountain of a project in front of you. I don't know if you felt like that. You said you entered with trepidation, but to me, I'd be like, no way. And you faced that, and you did exactly what you wanted to do. You set your mind to it. You decided to be adaptable. You really got down into the trenches and did the work with people and hired the right people. And I hope that you feel like you came out on the other end having done just what you said now, that, not everybody's going to agree with you and all the approaches that you took, but they're going to know that you had an open ear to their, thoughts and questions, and that you had the best interests of that district in mind. But I think your superpower is just being brave, to be perfectly honest with you.
It does take courage, and I'm glad you said that, because, and I think that's again true of leadership in any industry, especially any high profile industry. It does take courage. It's lonely too, right? I mean, it's just I woke up every day knowing that the media was literally watching every single thing I did, every single thing I said, right? The employees were doing the same, the communities were doing the same. And so, it does take courage. And I think particularly in public education, both K-12 and higher, it not only takes courage, it takes will, right? It takes willpower to say, these are things that need to be done. It's not going to be comfortable. It's not going to be easy. But if we're going to have a first-rate school district or first-rate university or first-rate private organization that's providing educational needs, this is the direction that we need to go together. And there are tough days in those jobs for sure. But I think, going back to what you just said, Trina, I really throughout my whole career, no matter what I've been doing, there's very few days when I haven't ended the day and thought I did something good today. Even if it wasn't super tangible, I could say I worked on behalf of something positive today. And that's a great feeling. I mean, that's why I really like working in education at all levels, because if it's done well, if it's done right, if you, really believe in it and again, surround yourself with the right people and execute to the best of your ability, you're not only building individuals, but you're building communities, right? But at the end of the day, it's the institution that is, creating good citizens. It's creating informed citizens, informed parents and families and employees. And that's the public, right? That's the public with a capital P. And I think if our country is going to survive and thrive beyond all of the division that we're currently seeing, we have to redouble our efforts to these institutions and have the kind of visionary and committed leadership that will continue to create the citizenry that we want, that we need.
I think you should take some applause from both Matt and I think our whole listening audience. I know when you look at yourself introspectively, it probably doesn't seem so shining, but the light is really shining on a great leader here, someone who's inspired teams and who's really stood by their passions and delivered, in communities and has a real eye for what, our whole public community nation needs right now in strong leadership and brave leadership and passionate leadership. So we just want to say thank you for doing the work that you've done over your career and for sharing some of those insights with us and with our listening audience. I know people are going to be really inspired by this episode. Like, I am going to go out with a charge tomorrow to the workday and bring the passions that they have to the workplace. So thanks for being with us, David.
Well, thank you again. You're both very kind to have me, and I've enjoyed the conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us today on the Wear Your Cape to Work podcast, hosted by Project Insight. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, follow, or leave us a comment. If you subscribe to our YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or other favorite podcast channels, you'll receive notifications of all of our new episodes. We'd also love it if you would share Wear Your Cape to Work with your network of PMPs or anyone else who might enjoy the show. Project Insight is an online project and portfolio management software that helps companies connect project data from across all of their teams and software tools so that they can make confident decisions about their business. Our website is projectinsight.com, and there you can find many resources for project professionals, including free PDU webinars, as well as a place to register for a demonstration or a consultation with one of our success teams. Thank you once again for joining today's conversation, and most importantly, thanks for wearing your cape to work.